Good evening. How are you?
Good.
You're just gonna toggle between
How's the
us
baby?
two.
Oh, he's great. He got home last night, so we're having fun with him.
Nice.
Joe?
Ellen, how you doing?
Can whoever's on the phone please let me know who they are?
Barry Baltzell?
On the phone call, not with video.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. Misunderstood what you said.
Well, you look fabulous, Jerry.
I'm on Larry Carstensen, just on the phone.
Thank you.
Shannon and Diane just sent asking for a link.
Looks like Ray's out camping.
Yeah,
I know.
fishing.
Up on the north.
Pretty nice.
I'm on the Selway. No, that's where I wish I was
Yeah.
every day.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Anthony, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Sorry I couldn't be there in person with you. Shannon, in order to have all of us know who is on the call for roll call, would you please announce all council members, planning and zoning commission members, and urban renewal agency members who are participating tonight?
City Council is Lynn Borders, Steve Anthony, Linda Wilhelm, Joe Malloy, Alan Wolf, Carrie Thorson, and Mayor Ron Jacobson. Planning and zoning is Vicky Jo Carey, Ross
Schlotthauer.
Schlotthauer, Nancy Hampy, Ryan Davis. Urban Renewal is Lynn Crosby, Colin Coles, Jerry Balzell, Eric Clemenson, and Larry Cartenson, Jamie Davis. And Ray Kimball's here with Planning and Zoning also.
Good, thank you. So we'll show that the meeting is called to order and roll call has been taken. And who is running with this program tonight? Who's leading it off?
Bob Seal, Community Development Director.
Your show, Bob.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. Hello, council, boards, commissions. Glad to have you all
Bob,
here.
may I interrupt for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Shannon, could you do me a favor, please, as I see Bob and I see a few of the other attendees on the screen, but if someone has a question, Shannon, could you please interrupt and let us know so they can ask that question in case I don't see them?
Yes.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Bob. Go ahead.
No problem. I'm just here to do the brief introduction as to why we're here and then turn it over to the consultants to present on the work that has been completed so far. So it's kind of been a long road. This is focusing on the city center area. We've got two pieces going on tonight. We've got this update or addendum to the city center master plan that was originally completed in 2005. And then we're also kind of covering the infrastructure list that is being considered for the feasibility study for the urban renewal district that is also pending and proposed for the downtown core. You might remember it's been a while, but in July of 2019 is when we actually declared the downtown as a deteriorating area. So we've come a long way since then, but it's been a long road to get here. In August, ULI had come and done a presentation on the issues that we would look at and want to see within a downtown area, and that was done to this same group with the Planning and Zoning Commission, the City Council, and the Urban Renewal Agency. That fall, we started looking at the need for an urban renewal, an update to the city center master plan. In order to help feed the feasibility study and develop the plan for the urban renewal district in the city center. So in February of 2020, we went into contract to do an update to the city center master plan as well as to complete the feasibility study. Well, COVID kind of pushed everything back a notch. This was supposed to be completed earlier this year, but due to COVID, we had to take a different way of getting feedback and doing public forums and stuff like that. And ultimately, we ended up going with an online survey in order to get that public forum type of feedback. And they'll discuss what those survey results were, and honestly, the fact that it was one of the best turnouts, essentially, that we've ever had for any project. So with that, Matt Gillis with Welsh Comer will begin presenting, and then Olivia Metz with the Metz Group will finish that off with stuff regarding the feasibility study. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody, all the boards and commission members. Matt Gillis, 315 Lakeside, Suite 100, if you need that. Let me get this started here. So Bob tells me everybody can see this. Please let me know if you can't. So as Bob introduced, both Olivia Metz and I will tag team this presentation, because although this was two different efforts, one being the City Center Master Plan addendum and the second being the feasibility study, they're interrelated and they fit well together. So about halfway through, I'll pass it off to Olivia, but we'll cover both subjects. Because I think everybody, with the exception of maybe Shelley and Bill Melvin, is new to this, at least from the 2005 master plan process. There might be some others. I felt it appropriate to share some history first. So because a lot's changed in 15 years. So the original plan was a joint effort funded between the city and the URA, started in 2004, finished up in 2005. It followed a pretty standard process where we start very broad, 30,000 foot level, big ideas, visions, all that. But we slowly narrow the focus as we hear from the public and the stakeholders and the planning team and staff. And ultimately, we get down to some action, some tangible things that we can go do. The original plan focused on three areas. The land use patterns and the project actions, which is a list of projects, some transportation and circulation issues, and then some more of the development side, the design and overlay districts. Like any good planning process, it had a pretty robust public outreach strategy. There was more than one workshop, public meeting. You might recognize a couple people out there. I see Colin in there, right there. Mm-hmm. There was also a steering committee. The steering committee meaning, yes, they're members of the public, but they're a little more plugged in. They're leaders of the community, developers, and they bring a pretty unique perspective. And so you all know what that is. One statement that caught my eye in the original master plan was this over to the right. The City Center Plan strives to guide the future development pattern and the look and feel of the Post Falls City Center District. And it did a pretty good job at that. The reason I show you this is this will come up again, but this was the original boundary, the black line there. That was the original boundary of the City Center Plan and the City Center Urban Renewal District, which recently closed. Again, I mentioned the planning process started very broad. I'm not going to read the vision statement here, but it started up in the vision area, somewhat nebulous, big ideas, but they were summarized into the city center we need an identity down here, and I think that's not a surprise to anybody. We have an opportunity to capitalize on our natural resources, and we can do a better job with pedestrian linkage and then provide a atmosphere in the city center area where people want to live. So as we moved from the vision, we started to focus a little bit more into the goals. There were 7 main goals. And again, they all have to do and they support the identity above it, okay? But ultimately, what we're all trying to get to is what are the things that we can go do? And out and through the planning process, the output of that, and hopefully you can see that, was a list of 25 projects. And with any type of planning effort like this, you're going to get a pretty long list, right? And you're not necessarily going to, you're not going to be able to address all of them. And the ones highlighted in green are those that we've completed in the last 15 years. So there's a handful left over, and that's okay. Just let you read that for a second. So some of the highlights that we were able to accomplish was obviously this campus, City Hall, and the Chamber of Commerce building. While City Hall was under construction, we were able to do a demonstration project on 4th between Spokane and William. Shortly thereafter, I think the year after, we did the little block of Frederick, and then William, and then the Centennial Trail parking lot. That was all one project, those three. Recently, the Spokane Street Vitalization Project happened with the islands and the sidewalks. And then as part of that Spokane Street project was the Centennial Trail crossing with the pedestrian actuated beacons as a safety enhancement. And then more recently, the Spokane Street Mullen traffic signal. And then the fruit of this, as we're starting to see, is there's businesses. The ones I've listed here are just restaurants, but something has started. So that was a brief history, and we could talk for hours on it, and it's a good document if you haven't read it. What the addendum effort is not, is a recreation of that master plan. You all spent a lot of time and a lot of money to get a pretty good master plan. All we're trying to capture is how does the public feel about City Center and the original master plan now, and what has changed. Lord knows the population has changed. We all know that. We're all dealing with it. But it's a different economy. Commerce is different. The demographics of the people, which I'll show you in some statistics, moving in are different. And obviously the leadership is different. So again, it's not a replacement. It's an addendum. So the primary focus was first to reach out to the public. And we did that, and we got great turnout. I think it was 160-ish responses, which is pretty good for a master plan. We also reached out to a new group of stakeholders, which I'll share that list with you. Ultimately, with input from the public, input from the stakeholders, a review of the original plan, what we're after is an updated list of to-dos that need to be done in the city center area. What isn't done is part of this effort, and what should be looked at in the coming years or months, is there's concern about the smart code, which I'll show you in some of the stakeholder responses. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just some feedback I received. So that's not covered, nor is zoning and land use, and then the development overlay district. So those are things that are they're in that original document, but ultimately at some point they should be revisited. So because of COVID, we weren't able to meet face-to-face with people, so we had to do an electronic online outreach program. We put together a pretty lengthy and robust video. You probably saw it, hopefully you did, where we asked several questions, and we got, like Bob said, 164 responses, which is really good. And I think it was an 8-minute video, which is a long time to ask for somebody's attention electronically. So the first thing we did is we asked some demographic questions, so we get an idea of who is responding. So the first, you live in Post Falls, most of the people did. Second is, if so, how many years? This is interesting. I think 15 years ago, this graph would have looked a lot different. I think we would have seen a lot of, I've lived here 40 to 50 years, I've lived here for 50 years, 60 years. Now we're seeing a change, right? It's loaded up front where the 0 to 10 years is a higher, at least the responsees is a higher percentage. So again, change in demographic. Do you work in Post Falls? Right down the middle, almost 50-50. What brings you to Post Falls is primarily work and family. And then finally, what's your age? I was really encouraged by this. This is I don't think we can do much to get the under 21 crowd to participate in this type of stuff, but we got a pretty good distribution of age beyond that. So then we got into the specific master plan, city center questions. How do you feel about the original 2005 plan? Is the vision still the same? Generally speaking, yes. The more yeses than nos. We're generally on the right track from that original plan. What's interesting, though, is question number 2 kind of seems to contradict it. Should the vision change? Yes, 56%. What I'm not showing here is the commentary that accompanied all of the public comments. So we asked the question, but we also gave folks an opportunity to comment. And what we heard was very consistent was, yeah, we like the direction we're headed, but it needs to happen faster. And that, I think, is the reason we're seeing this contradiction. Yes, we're on the right track, but we should see things happening by now. Do you identify wide sidewalks being important to a city center? Generally, yes. Are carefully placed seating areas and street furniture important in a city center? That's a yes. How important is mixed use in our city center? While it is important according to the data, there was concern from, I'd say 5 or 6 of the respondents that why all the multifamily, and I know that's probably not news to you, I'm sure you may have heard that, but I heard that and looked at that in some of the data. Is wayfinding important? By wayfinding, I mean, is there a coherent and well thought out and common theme of, I'm at City Hall, how do I get down to Camelin Park? Is there clear signage that's easy for me to understand that it's very common in bigger cities? The thought was yes, that is important at some point. Is a common theme for downtown decor important? And maybe the best way to think about this is, should the light poles and the benches and the trash receptacles generally have a common theme? Like your City Hall right now, there's this, a lot of them are blue, exposed aggregate poles, and nice benches. I think, as expected, that was a yes. Are central gathering places important within a city center? I want you to notice this one. This had the highest strongly agrees. There was an awful lot of people who felt that it's really important that we're able to gather somewhere in our city center area. Is public art important? Generally speaking, yes. And then this question, I wish we would have reworded it. It's a little wordy, but do city centers and mixed-use development areas require diversified housing options at higher densities than other portions of a community to support commercial activity? In other words, should we have mixed use, high-density mixed use in commercial areas, or is it enough for outside people to come in and support your commercial areas? So the respondents thought, yeah, generally people should be living downtown. Any comments on any of that data? Nothing? Okay. So that was the public, just the 160 some from the public we got through the Facebook video and questionnaire. We also had a steering committee. Similar setup as the original. The committee was slightly larger than this, but some of the respondents were some of the members were just too busy and weren't able to participate. But I was able to interview each of these people, and we had great conversations. I asked 9 questions, and then we went on several rabbit trails, but I'm just going to summarize pretty quickly what I heard, and I try to distill everything into just a few bullet points to get the message to you as the decision makers. So what are the strengths of our city center area? It was very common, we have so much potential, we just need to capitalize on it. Things are starting to happen, but it's slow. I think you heard that theme earlier in the presentation. Restaurants are starting to get to this critical mass where it's bringing more and more people in, and hopefully that will help with some momentum. The streetscapes, Spokane Street, 4th, Frederick William, that's a good thing. And then public art, this was interesting. Yes, public art's great, but we have to be careful what it is, which is, I don't know how you do that with art, so. Weaknesses. This reflects one of the, that highest respondent of we need a gathering place to help our culture, to help our identity, sense of community. And then geographically, where is downtown? And so that's something we're lacking. People that haven't grown up here, understanding where downtown is has been a challenge. Pedestrian connections, primarily east of Spokane Street, still a bit of a weakness, very little sidewalk out there. And then I heard both sides of the multifamily. We need rooftops, and then I heard we need commercial. The commercial will bring the rooftops. And so amongst the fantastic steering committee members, there were slightly different opinions. And then you'll see this a couple times too, the smart code, for whatever reason, I heard from primarily the developers on the steering committee, was a challenge. Again, they weren't saying it's bad, but it's been challenging for them. Primary changes since 2005, obviously the population, and then a reduction in living wage jobs. That was the feedback I received. Is the vision the same today as it was in 2005? And yes, the city's on the right track. Similar to what the public felt, development needs to happen quicker. And then we need diverse housing in downtown. We can't just be apartments for 25-year-olds, or we can't just be retirement housing. It's got to be a diverse mixture. And then again, the smart code. Revisiting it was a theme. The biggest initial needs that I heard from both sides, again, we need more residential or we need more commercial. So there was, I wish I could tell you it was one or the other, but it was an even mix. Smart code, again, that came up. Continue with the streetscape improvements. That is consistent with the findings and capital improvement plan associated with the 2018 or 19 city center parking plan. Oh, and that's that last bullet, is the lack of parking in the city center area. That was also evident in that plan. And then finally, encourage mixed-use development. So as you know, the city center district recently closed, and you are considering a new district. Of the steering committee members, they thought, yes, that would be helpful if that district was slightly extended or expanded. And Olivia will show you an updated map about where that expansion is proposed. And then there were a couple that desired the URA to aggressively target development. And then finally, is a business or downtown business association helpful? Unanimously, people said yes. And unanimously, I think, people said, but I don't know if we're quite ready for that yet. So before I turn this over to Olivia, there was that list of 25 projects I showed you. There's an awful lot that haven't been done yet. And so one of the efforts that we undertook and staff undertook was consider the steering committee input, consider the public input, and then determine if those remaining projects are still a priority, okay? And then also what needs to be done, what else needs to be done in the city center area. So we spent a lot of time refining and updating that list that will ultimately be included in some of the feasibility financial analysis that Olivia will talk about. And I think that's a pretty good point to turn it to Olivia. I'm happy to answer any questions at any point or now or whenever you'd like.
Are there any questions to Matt at this point?
We have none.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Olivia?
Hello, council, commission, and board members. Thank you for having me here. My name is Olivia Metz with the Metz Group. So here is the original city center boundary that Matt was referring to earlier. But based on the results from the stakeholder engagement and public engagement, as well as the residual action items that are needed based on the master plan update, the proposed city center boundary was expanded to the north and to the east, and a sliver to the south. See if I can, oh, it actually works. And this is the list that you guys have, I believe, in your packet. The list has slightly altered since the one that you have received. There's a couple additions to it, but we will give you a revised update following the meeting. So this is a list of the infrastructure projects that will be required to implement the master plan. Again, this is based on the public engagement process, as well as the action items that were required to implement the master plan. Now, staff can speak a little bit more to this list, and I'll talk a little bit more about the tiers and what that means later. But right now, all you need to know is that there's a large list of project infrastructure. We call it the wish list. So to kind of go over the process and our line of thinking as we were tackling such a robust area, since Welchcomer was tackling the update to the master plan and the parking plan was just conducted, we thought it was a good time to really incorporate all of those, the updates all together, because it really is a little bit more synergistic in order to have a more successful urban renewal district plan. And the potential build out from the parking plan was incorporated into the feasibility study, which is a very important component. So to back up a little bit, I know you all are familiar with urban renewal, but I'm just going to kind of do a little urban renewal 101. So urban renewal is the ability to focus dollars into specific areas for development, for public infrastructure improvements. What it is a planning boundary to reinvest taxes from new developments in the area. Now this really kind of hones in on some of the weaknesses that Matt had mentioned earlier, because from the pedestrian connectivity that was on the weakness list, as well as the identification of the downtown core and the lack of cultural identity. So this really, urban renewal does really address a lot of the weaknesses that were identified in the master plan update. It also provides opportunity for commercial, the potential sales driven by not only retail, but the office sector too, with the new offices maybe coming into the landings or some other places to the north. The capturing of sales is really important, which will help with the increment revenue. And how it works is, this is just a really basic kind of image to help you understand the base value. Let's say the ground is worth $100,000. A new retail development comes in and increases the value to $1 million. The URD can use that property tax collected on that $900,000, the increment, for those public infrastructure projects. And so with taxing entities, once all of the increment is at the end of the Life's district, all the increment will be going back to the taxing entities. But taxing entities during that time still collect the same base amount that existed before, as well as their budgets stay the same as well. And impact fees are still collected for fire, police, and the like, and the increment gained, obviously, like I said, mentioned, will be coming from the new developments. So moving forward, this is kind of my bread and butter to really help identify the feasibility of the district. So just to kind of put the feasibility in one little snapshot, I'm going to kind of go through the thought process of how the feasibility study will be conducted. So we'll use the parking plan, the potential development from the parking plan as future development, kind of understand the project or the assessed values, what they are today, what that might look like in the future based on the parking plan, as well as the anticipated projects. So there's some current projects going on, the landings, the veneer site, and the like. So those all are incorporated into the future development. Building permits is another one. So all of that's incorporated into the future development. And then the public improvement costs are based on that wish list. And so, using those public improvement costs, there'll be a cash flow analysis done within the feasibility study that helps kind of time out what that development will look like over time and whether or not it will be feasible in the end. And then I'd like to put together the different growth scenarios, the no development growth, 50% and 100%, just to kind of give you different scenarios to be a little bit more conservative. If no development were to occur, obviously there will be development, and 50% just in case, and then 100% just a little bit more aggressive. And so going back to the wish list, the projected assessed values in the future, so all of the improvement project costs are really tied in to this list. Now you can tell that there's a large list here, but it's all needed and required based on the master plan requirement or action items. But we had to tier them out based on, in order for a better cash flow as well as timing of specific developments. So all of the tier 1 infrastructure projects, for example, are occurring. So it's based on development that's occurring today and also built in the near term. So, and then the tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 infrastructure projects. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they won't happen, and that they can't happen at any point. But for the district plan, in order for basically not to have an addendum to the district plan, we wanted to incorporate everything into it. And so all of the tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 projects won't be incorporated into the feasibility analysis, but it is going to be incorporated into the district plan, just to give an overarching understanding of what the vision is for the district. Now, at any point, based on funding, any of these infrastructure projects can be funded at any time, and it will always go to the commission for approval before any of these will be even selected or paid for. So as you can see, a lot of the tier 1 type projects are based around the parking plan, the $12 million. The city center parking plan, for example, is to implement that parking plan, and which is a very high need, which was also addressed in the public engagement process. So, did you guys have any questions about the list and the different tiers? Because I don't want to confuse anybody. Len?
Lynn?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you go up to the microphone so everybody on Zoom can hear you?
The original 2005 plan and the survey both indicated a high incidence of people feeling like we needed a central gathering area, although that's tier 3. And I was surprised that it wasn't a tier 1 item, because clearly, if we don't have a central gathering place and we don't have an attraction to bring people down here, we're going to have a lot of parking sitting vacant. That's my concern. And my other concern is that, I went through and read the 2018 City Center Parking Plan. There's a lot of issues in there that I'm not sure how they're going to be adapted to not only the district, but also how they're going to be received by the public. Back-end parking, elimination of driveways off of First, Second, Third, and Fourth Streets, and an alleyway behind some of the properties which are basically almost set back far enough to be on the back of their lots to begin with. So those are some of the concerns I had, where we have a tier one category of $12 million. You know, as a former banker, I'm also concerned about most districts don't have a lot of money until they're well into the 10th, 12th, 14th. We saw that in Greens Ferry. We also can't sell bonds and finance things until we have a stream of cash flow.
Yep.
$12 million is going to be a long way off. So those are my key concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. And just to address the 12 million sticker tag right up front, it will be allocated, the way we allocated it, and especially for the cash flow purposes, is to have like $1 million per year for a long time. And it really doesn't start until, I'm trying to remember what the cash flow looks like, but it doesn't really start until, I think, 2025, maybe even. It's way down the road, but you're right. Now, as far as addressing the parking plan and the tiers, that is above my pay grade, so I'm going to turn it over to Matt or Bob on that one.
Great points, Len. I was just going to address the parking plan, because we did that. I don't want to, and I think we said this in the plan, there's no proposal to go removing anybody's driveways, anything like that. So there's just a plan in place, so as and if things redevelop, there's something in place. So again, nobody's going to be, losing driveways.
I just got a quick question.
I just wanted to say really quick, as he noted, I mean, each block will be done on a block by block and case by case basis. And as she had noted, is that it looks like its plan is spread out over a many year period. And again, being implemented, it's a master plan that was already passed and implemented and stuff like that. But again, it all will happen as development happens a lot of times. But we are also accommodating and making room for those existing and remaining houses and things like that and businesses that are there.
So I just got a quick question on the tier one. Are those in the order that you would propose, or are those just kind of the order that they would come up? Because I just have a question on the Idaho Veneer site north, Idaho Veneer site south. Is that mainly the cost for the infrastructure of water and sewer to go in streets, or maybe you could explain that? I'm a little confused on those just a little bit.
The Idaho Veneer site north is north of 4th Street, south is south of 4th Street. And that there is a more detailed breakdown for that north side because it was being reviewed more thoroughly prior to this, and they may develop at different phases within that general area. So,
But the developer hasn't presented any type of master plan.
No, we do
city
not.
Yet, which would
Nothing that has been reviewed. We have been presented some conceptual plans.
Okay, so this is just
And those are kind of based on potential.
the conceptual what they might do there. Okay,
Yes, absolutely.
And infrastructure to get them there.
to get them started. Okay.
Linda?
Yes, I don't know who will answer this, but I am not sure that Lynn Crosby's question was answered, and I would be a little concerned too with the gathering center in the third tier when it was one of the very top answers in the questions back from the public and from the stakeholders, I think you called them, Matt. So just kind of wondering.
I think that when we sat down and went through the list of projects that were going to be pending within the city center, we really were trying to focus on looking at the tier one as to, all right, how do we get development to happen and actually encourage that development and also make it feasible for them. So we really did focus on the Idaho Veneer site, and we focused on the landings end of things. That's where we anticipate seeing the redevelopment happening in the near term because of projects that we have been privy to to a certain level. whether it's conceptual or whatever. So that's where that started. Now the gathering place, I would love to put the gathering place into tier 1, but is that what is going to get funded quickly? Is that, and I guess that's why we're here, because we want to know what is the most important aspects to the URD, or to, within the city center and within the urban renewal district. Is it more important to get a building, water and sewer and frontage improvements, or is it more important to have the gathering place, which, trust me, I want to see a gathering place just as much as anybody else. So, but that's a really good point. So we can definitely take note of that and have that, we can move that up in the tiers and see how it looks within the feasibility.
And could I follow that up with just one more thing then?
Yeah.
Given the fact the situation with the Vista Park that's going on, why couldn't part of the gathering place be some of the things that are going to be scaled down in the Vista Park? Why would that be considered? Or
Well, I think that really does come down to, as we're working on our master on implementing the master plans. I mean, I know that like the Parks master plan, they did focus on a city center improvement plan as well. I haven't had a chance to really look at that one super thoroughly, but I know that there was a central gathering place that was discussed in that as well. And I think that it could be, we can look at that Avista Park as being part of that gathering place, or becomes that gathering place. And we may not need a separate gathering place after the Avista Park is completed too. We want to review that and see, does this meet the needs of what the citizens wanted? Or should we be looking at another location as well? Where can we find some land to create a new one, another one? It's all, I think there's a lot of ifs, and how do we make this happen? So.
Carrie has a question.
So that brings us to a gathering place and everyone's individual idea of what a gathering place is. So we have this beautiful courtyard since 2008-9 here at City Hall. It gets a little hot in the middle of the day on all that asphalt, but that's a gathering place. And then we're talking about the Avista. So what is, we're talking amphitheaters, or I guess gathering place is pretty abstract, or could be interpreted in multiple ways. I see the courtyard at this beautiful City Hall facility as a gathering place.
True.
Alan, did you have a question?
I do.
And Russ in the back has a question
think
too,
so.
when there's time.
Unless somebody's going to tell me what a gathering
If you
place
want me to, and that is the thing is, and I think that again, like the parks, the plan that they did for the downtown really does kind of look at that in more detail. Do we want a gathering place that is providing, hookups for food trucks? Is it going to provide, additional outlets for entertainment purposes? Should it be something that should be set up for farmers markets and the like, or are they events that we're looking at? It really depends on what those amenities that we're looking at. Really, you want to create a gathering place that meets everybody's needs, but it's really tough to when you're limited in funding and you're limited in location and land. And I think it does, gets the gathering place that's described within the city center master plan is probably somewhat similar to what ultimately came out of the parks master plan as well. So.
That definition. So when you're having conversations in the community,
Yep.
It is like, and I don't mean to always chuckle whenever someone mentions where is downtown. For 35 years I've been trying to answer that question for people, and I believe it's right down here.
Right.
Others might say that Celtice Way is the world's longest main street. And so I think that we need to have some consensus on some of these terms that we're using, or there could be some confusion as we're having these conversations with the community, with the public. Who are the stakeholders in this whole process?
So Councilor Thorson, I'm going to answer that with saying you actually want it to be somewhat generic, because you don't have the plans for down here completely developed yet. You don't know what's going to happen at Idaho Veneer. You don't know what's going to happen at the landings. And so by leaving that somewhat generic, when you go to determine which is the best gathering place, where do you want that to be, you have some flexibility in that. So if you're too specific and say you want the gathering place to be a Vista Park, then in an urban renewal district, you're not going to be able to fund it anywhere else.
It doesn't have to be specific as to the exact location, but what is the gathering place? You know, like Bob just gave several.
Again, I think it needs to be generic enough where it includes those different areas, because when it comes time to build it, it's going to be what the folks who are currently in these positions will want at that time. And we found that with urban rural districts where you get too specific, then what it prevents is the ability to develop what the market bears at the time when you go to develop it. And so you need to be somewhat generic in a plan like this, and then you get more specific in like the parks plans and such, that where you really drill down.
Well, that will help me answer
Yes.
that question.
Yeah, and I 100% agree that when it comes time to building the gathering place, that's when we decide, okay, well, what has been built, what already serves the purpose, you know, what do we really need at these locations? And you almost run charrettes, and you almost do the design at that time in that place with trying to fit it within a budget that is going to be met. But yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ross has a question?
Well, my question maybe can be answered by Matt, but it's along the same lines of gathering place. If I was in this focal group and they were asking me that, I would envision a business. Most people want to meet at restaurants, or they want to meet with other people where they have food and drink, and these are what I think of when I think of a gathering place, and I envision downtown Post Falls. I envision this section of Spokane Street. I envision people and businesses and people walking and restaurants in a vital area that the huge mass of people we have living in town can go, and that's where they would gather. And so, you know, maybe some people are envisioning that when they say gathering place. And I think that's what I would like to see, and the people that I talk to would like to see. And they envision commerce. And to what Len was saying, you know, we have a free market and business leads the way. And if you clear the path for businesses to come in, then people want to come in, then you need a place to park. But right now we don't need anywhere to park because nobody's going down there. We have, you know, 4 restaurants in 15 years. We're not making a lot of headway to a downtown area that people want to be in. And so I think that we need to keep in mind the business. That's what's going to lead. I mean, we can have color coordinated trash cans down there, but there's not going to be a business down there. You gotta make it business friendly. And so that's what I believe will be the number one driver. If you can make it business friendly with utilities and infrastructure and smart code, you know, the parking. You know, if we implement and dictate back-in parking spots, and maybe if a place right now has a driveway, we're not gonna take that away, but they won't be able to have a driveway on the smart code when they go from residential to commercial. I know this is the case with one site for sure. And it limits options. And if we dictate how business has to behave right now without an open mind, we're going to only limit business. Because basically, you know, regulation can only limit commerce, you know, by deregulating and getting out of the way and having an open mind. That's how you foster commerce, I believe. So, but anyway, maybe Matt can elaborate if any of the people you talk to, when they think of meeting space, think of businesses.
I'll do my best. There wasn't in the discussions, there wasn't a specific, it should be this. So I don't know if it's an outdoor plaza or if it's an actual building that's used for gathering. But as Shelley mentioned, that's kind of okay, so we don't box ourselves in. I wanted to address, if I could, one of Len's other comments about the back-end angle parking. It is mentioned in the city center parking plan as something to consider. And as you know, maybe you've noticed the city did a pilot plan to see what type of compliance we would get. And I think it's still kind of up in the air.
Alan has a question.
Well, I have a comment that then will lead to a question, I guess. From the beginning, I felt like this is way too big. We talk about a city center, but this thing is huge. And we talk about where do we want downtown, but several of the first tier are all the way out at the veneer plant. If we're gonna get anything done, I think we need to focus it down to a particular area that's a little smaller where we can put a lot more energy into it. Otherwise, we're gonna shoot ourselves in the foot, and it's gonna develop out at the veneer plant, and it's gonna develop here, and we still don't have a downtown. And to someone's point, the graph showed we've grown 65% in population, and we have what development in what we consider our downtown area? Very little. So I'd like to understand why it has to be so big. And there's so much residential area in there I can't see ever developing into a downtown or commercial or anything like that. Why does it have to be so big? Why can't we focus on Spokane Street and, as the area that's where we really want the downtown to be, and that's where we're going to put forth our efforts to make that develop. And, if something happens out at the veneer plant, great, but it doesn't have to be part of the city center. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, too big for me.
Did you want to address that? I wasn't part of the boundary process.
No, and the boundary process, part of the reasoning of looking at the boundaries the way that they are is, well, for one, we want to try and make an urban renewal district that is feasible, and we need to be able to look at where that increment is going to be coming from. When we did break down the boundaries, we really did recognize that there were 3 different nodes, and I think you guys have a slide on that somewhere, don't you? Did you guys get into that?
It's in the draft report.
It's in the draft report. So they broke it down into 3 different nodes. I don't have that in front of me right now. One, looking at around the intersection of Celtice and Spokane Street, kind of a broad area there, kind of recognizing that that type of commercial node is going to be different than another commercial node that we looked at, which is over by the Idaho veneer site, where the 4th Street meets Celtice. So we anticipate seeing another node of commercial activity and development happening over there. And then you can look at the node of the downtown strip of Spokane Street. Spokane Street is kind of that corridor that we do anticipate seeing as, okay, this is our downtown strip. That's our city center strip. But if you go to, go to downtowns of other areas, Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, Hayden Lake, you've got a downtown, but it is spread out, and there are various areas, and when you try and encompass that, it does include various types of housing throughout the whole, general area, and it's multiple blocks that you're adding into there. So this one really was trying to envelop a larger area, but it does recognize that there are different characteristics within that one large area. Because we are also looking at improvements. We'd like to see improvements along Celtice as well. It's a high trafficked area, but it is, for one thing, not walkable in any way besides having sidewalks on the side. Crossing that is its own nightmare. But that's in the future. Those are plans that we would have to look at in the future. If there's ever increment that could add to that, fantastic. But, again, I think that the focus is Spokane Street, but we do recognize that there is a big focus happening over at Idaho veneer site. We didn't want to lose out on the opportunity to encourage the development to happen over there. They need the water, they need the infrastructure. They've got a lot of infrastructure costs that will be associated with redeveloping that old mill site as well. So I think that's kind of why we went with a larger district. Well, I know that's why we went with a larger district, so we can encompass a large area, multiple aspects within the downtown that would also help feed the feasibility study.
And as I recall, it's connectivity, right? It's all about the connectivity of.
Well, and there's a connectivity. We do feel that the Idaho veneer site and the landing site kind of bookended what we would ultimately consider the downtown, in a way. Connected primarily by 4th Street and 3rd Street Railroad. We don't necessarily look at, 1st and 2nd being filled with commercial. We're not looking at that type of stuff. We're not thinking about it in that way, but in 20 years, 30 years, there's a lot that can change within a downtown. Yes, there's a lot of single family down there right now, and a lot of it is on larger lots, and they're getting older and more dilapidated. Not dilapidated, but deteriorating conditions. There were many structures within this area that were deteriorating when we did the study. And we are likely to see some of those begin turning over into different types of uses aside from a single family home. So we recognized that within this downtown city center area.
I appreciate the explanation.
I'm going to say also, this is, I don't even know how many years, 3-4 years that we've been talking about this, but the two sites that were brought up during other joint workshops and during our planning were both the Idaho Veneer site and the landings, that the individuals attending those felt strongly that those were the two areas they wanted us to include in the city center. Saltese, I think, was more of a third option, but the two mill sites, there was pretty strong support to include both of those.
Okay, so what about the area around, say, Templin's, all that housing, why is that included?
Most of it is north of Templin's. I believe within the district we did include the swath of land that's adjacent to Templin's, that's on its own individual site.
Right, we had a discussion about that it didn't include the Templin's site parcel itself. It's the parcel that's undeveloped.
It's undeveloped, yeah.
Well, I've made my point. I think it's too big. I'd rather see us focus on a downtown city center core where we can put our energies and our efforts into a smaller area.
And if you look at the infrastructure list and you look at the tiers 1, 2, and 3, 4, that's what you're looking at. That is focused in Spokane Street, Idaho Veneer site, and a potential few spots in between, as well as some parking improvements. Obviously, a lot of parking improvements in some form over a long period of time. But that is where that list, while it's a big map, the list, if we just tried to carve out the area where we're going to put the money into it, we have to recognize that those improvements that we're making along those streets, along those blocks, are not just benefiting those blocks and those streets. They're benefiting a larger area of anybody who, you can kind of look at it and think, well, I live down in the southeast corner. It's a walking distance. This becomes an amenity, essentially a downtown over on Spokane Street also becomes an amenity for those that are living living within the downtown core. So
I'm going to go back to the list also. This was tailored kind of after how we did the tech park when it came to putting together lists. So an item that is in tier 3 can be funded before an item in tier 1. It's not prohibited. So I know Councilor Anthony asked about within just tier 1, is that rated or prioritized in any way? And the answer is no. Also, if something were to happen that created, again, a need for a tier 3 item to be funded prior to a tier 1, that's up to the city and urban renewal to make that determination. So in the language that will be included in the plan, it will identify that this is what we foresee. Here's how it's prioritized today, but a tier 3 could be funded prior to a tier 1 with agreement of the urban renewal and the city on that.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, that's an important note. I didn't do a good job of illustrating that, but that's one of the most important parts of this is we need to be able to incorporate everything into that broader vision so that the district plan has it in there. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen or it does not have to happen. But Shelley is absolutely right. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in this order. As development occurs, then those projects will be funded.
Ray, do you have a question?
I do. I've got I just kind of wanted to chime in because I think Alan had a pretty interesting point. One thing that we should at least think about or at least keep in mind is that because the Idaho Veneer site is, I guess, in a lot of ways now kind of a brownfield site, now that it's delinquent or not delinquent, but it's no longer in operation or soon to no longer be in operation. I'm not sure where it is right now. But at some point it's going to be basically a brownfield site. It is probably one of the most prime sites in that entire vicinity for redevelopment. And if it is considered that, then and there's plans for it. So it's one of the few large parcels down there that actually can happen in a probably, well, a short period of time, or at least under one developer. Whereas most of the properties down there are, little hodgepodges of individual ownerships. Many times, a single block will have, 7 or 8 or 10 different owners. So when you have a large chunk of property there that is quote unquote ripe for development, when that gives an urban renewal district a lot of seed money to start that increment and get it going. And if it's let's just say that increment starts sooner rather than later, then, and let's just say that, to talk in scope of numbers, apartments, let's just say it developed as an S4 at 20 units per acre. And I don't know whether, let's just say there's 200 apartments there. And apartments right now, the valuation of an apartment building is roughly about $120,000 per unit. So do the math. The increment is very, very large. And that's seed money that starts right away that can go and fund, all of these tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 improvements that otherwise, when you have these little tiny lots that, maybe an old crappy house gets torn down and a fourplex goes up. Those things don't happen very quickly, but if you get a larger development that does, then the increment happens very quickly. It builds momentum very quickly. And then we get the opportunity to see the funds grow and get those tier 2, tier 3 improvements that are more community focused and less infrastructure focused. And so that's the one point I really wanted to bring up. It's just kind of from a development standpoint, seeing that increment start sooner and on a large scale has a lot of benefit. And so I think that maybe having properties that are large and ripe for development in the urban renewal district is appropriate.
Say one more thing in terms of that. We did, again, the boundaries are being looked at and established primarily based on an urban renewal district idea. All right, so that's how we pulled it into, here's also our city center. The city center or the downtown district, or just if you want to talk about downtown, doesn't necessarily have to be the same exact boundaries as an urban renewal district. We could look at it differently from that. The urban renewal district, however, does need to be able to build that increment over time. Again, I think that and we actually did really look at the nodes on page 4 and really put some thought into that because of, granted, I think that the landings needs to be moved a little bit and needs to encompass Spokane Street as it's shown on here. But because we did recognize that it was a big downtown, and that you're going to have different characteristics between these different nodes within your same downtown. So just wanted to add that before I let it go.
Any other questions? Jerry's quiet. I think he has a question. No. Nobody else?
I got one more then. The landings. The landings has been sitting there. I mean, I think if we all could wave our magic wand, we would make something happen in the landings, which would then solidify the fact that this is the downtown area of Post Falls. What can we do as a city to get some momentum, to get something going in the landings?
Well, I mean, we could have looked at the idea of doing a demonstration project. That is something that urban renewal agencies can do. The city does own a small piece of land on the corner of Spokane Street and not 3rd, but just south of that. I think it's McReynolds or something along those lines, maybe 2nd, by the water tower. However, I don't know if we're going to necessarily need to. The majority of the landing sites are currently under some form of contract. we do have the northwest corner of 3rd and Spokane Street. They haven't submitted their plans yet, but they have been going through the pre-development phases and have a building designed, and we'll be filing shortly for that development. So we anticipate seeing groundbreaking this year on the site for additional development, and then even more next year and more the following year. So everybody's waiting. Looks like it's finally going to be coming to fruition, without actually having to do a demonstration project. But at the same time, we're still keeping our fingers crossed. There still has to be a transfer of property ownership and all that stuff. But the one that's on the northwest corner of 3rd and Spokane has transferred hands at least, so.
Olivia, were you done with your presentation, or do you have more to add?
I just have a timeline, but other than that, I mean, I think this is really good dialogue. It's good to hear feedback and understand the whole process, because we all need to be on the same page with it too. So if there's any questions or other than that, then I can go on with the timeline.
I think Jerry has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. I just wanted to follow up on, at what point in time will you have the feasibility study completed so that it can be reviewed for forecast for potential tax revenue and so on, and feasibility like that? Is that all included in the, I didn't see that before, but obviously we're going to be looking at anything that is forecast as being something that is very likely to happen, that's going to create business and commercial opportunities, that's going to generate the tax revenue to be able to provide us with a revenue stream with which we can fund and pay back any debt picture we might have to help with those improvements. And I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like at this stage of the game. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Well, this is the timeline. The master plan update is to be finalized in March, and the draft feasibility study will be done in March. And then the district plan will be drafted in April-ish. I'm looking at Len because I know that he drafts a lot of them. And then the plan review will occur with the URA, P&Z, Commission, and City Council, and then adopted by City Council by June is the set plan right now.
And could I ask one other question, and then I'll be quiet? In your timeline feasibility study, when you're including the expansion into Celtis and I believe it was Mullen, excuse me, both of those areas on each end of the forecast or the plan appear to be all the way through there, appear to be almost 100% full, which means more than likely there's not going to be a lot of movement in tax increment along the way. But are you using some of that forecasted tax increment in your feasibility study?
Yeah, so I'll be using the current assessed values, and the only way that I will project out any type of development is if it was in the parking plan, mainly around the city center area, because there's a lot of residential areas. That makes it a little bit more challenging. But then, yeah, you're right. The commercial outlay areas will probably stay the same in that regard.
Thank you.
Len? I'm just going to call on you because I don't know if anybody saw you.
Just to speak to Councilor Wolf's concerns, the size of the district is extraordinarily important, simply because we have, as you can tell, $64 million on the wish list. We may or may not get to that point of having tax increment, but without those two specific sites and all of the potential development nodes, we really won't have enough tax increment to make much of an impact. And I think we saw that with the original city center development. And the other thing is, with regard to the landings, that is a very significant opportunity. But it's unfortunately controlled by an insurance company, unlike a bank, which takes back property and has to write it down every year it sits on its books. An insurance company does not have to do that. So they basically have set prices at what they want to recover. And I think ultimately, perhaps in the next year or so, you'll see the market move to the point where people will actually be able to pay for the prices that they're offering these lots for. And I'm sure Councilor Wilhelm could speak to that also. But I think the market is moving. We're seeing tremendous growth in the value of raw land, the value of commercial land. You will receive, as a council, a tremendous amount of pressure to develop that as multifamily. I hope you will avoid that and focus commercial development and retail development, because that's really what's going to create and drive a downtown district. Thank you.
I got one quick question. What is the, or Shannon, sorry, what is the proposed life of this district that we're going to have coming up? How many years?
20.
20? Okay. And I think to that point, we don't know how things are going to be in 20 years for that life. So, you know, we could have, with the population growth, we could see expansion north of Celtice Way in there, because 20 years, just look how much we've changed in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think in 20 years, the size of the district warrants that, just due to the population growth and the expansion of Post Falls. So looking into the future, I don't see the district as being too big. I think we're going to see some changes. I think it's probably going to be just about the right size.
And I believe, and this is something that, because when I first looked at it too, I was like, wow, this is really big. But then as we started talking about it and talking about the nodes and the connectivity, and then you have to think about the increment, as Jerry and Len and Alan have mentioned, that you need that increment to drive the rest of the district and to pay for all the infrastructure. So you really do need some good development on the outskirts in order to really fund the downtown too. It kind of all plays into play, so. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question. Can you tell us what is going in on the corner of Spokane and 3rd Northwest corner? Is it residential or is it commercial? And if it is commercial.
It's medical.
It's medical.
It's a medical office, and they're looking at 2 stories. That's all I can really say about it right now. We don't have anything submitted. But because of the smart code, they're going 2 stories. Without the smart code, they'd be more likely to do 1, but we were able to utilize the code to push them towards the 2nd.
Matt, did you have any final thoughts?
Unless there's any other questions.
Bob?
Are there any other questions of either Matt or Olivia? I can't see any, but I'm assuming that means there are not at this point.
We have none.
So what's the next step, Bob?
Well, we wanted, really tonight, this is what we wanted to do, was be able to have this conversation, get this input, take all this into consideration, and try and incorporate it into this addendum and into the moving the feasibility study forward. Next steps will be, they will be completing the documents and submitting them to staff for us to start to review, and bring it back to the various boards and commissions for approval. Fingers crossed approval. Because we would like to be able to move this forward. So, you know, I think that we had some great conversations tonight, loved the questions, loved the comments, really helps us understand where we're going and feel like we, for the most part, are on the right track, and look forward to really hoping to wrap this stuff up this year, so.
I would like.
Thanks, Bob. My thought was that any of the agency members, any of the Planning and Zoning Commission members, any of the City Council members that has questions, comments, please feel free to provide those to Bob and city staff. If there's nothing else, is there anybody else that's got a comment right now?
Oh, that's what I was gonna say.
Okay, I would just like to say then that if that's all the input, I would like to thank everybody for your time tonight. Again, I apologize for not being able to join you in person, but I had something else more pressing that I would never pass up. But I do thank you for your time. And again, please feel free to reach out to staff with comments, et cetera. And I hope that we can get this thing moving forward and it meets everybody's expectations. With that, nothing else? I'll close the meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you all very much.
I know the meeting's closed, but I want to say something. I love that Ross Schlotthauer is on planning and zoning. Matt